So Chinese social media platforms have purged dozens of feminist activists and organizations from the internet, not entirely unlike Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook's recent clamping down on political discussion, censoring topics of particular sensitivity. And it's not even the first time that the Chinese government, the Chinese Communist Party, has gone after feminists. It's been an ongoing campaign for a couple of years, if I recall correctly. And predictably, of course, there's a number of people who've responded to reports of this with some glee, seeing any attempt to suppress feminists as a positive thing. I don't entirely disagree with them because, well, there's not much point in splitting hairs about it. And the fact is that feminism, especially third and fourth wave feminism, it's an existential threat. And at this point in history, I think that most reasonable and informed people recognize that. That is to say that if it sees widespread wholesale adoption, modern feminism's almost inevitable result is a drawn-out civilizational decline with an eventual and gradual descent into barbarism. You can argue against the points all day, but the fact is that if your society refuses to reproduce, demolishes relations between the sexes, prioritizes emotional security over physical security, undermines masculine virtues such as stoicism in the face of hardship, and actively degrades the value of woman, then your society will grow too old and too weak to defend itself from either internal or external threats. Feminist philosophy leads to all of the aforementioned, on top of introducing the sorts of poorly considered concepts that have led to the logic-defying feats of mental gymnastics that birthed the pro-non people of radical transactivism. A movement, by the way, that itself appears to have been tailor-made to annihilate individuality and freedom of expression, bedrocks of innovation.
Excuse me, it's ma'am. It is ma'am.
I can call the police if you'd like me to. You need to settle down.
You need to settle down and mind your business, okay? Ma'am, once again, ma'am.
I said both of you.
No, you said sir. Once again, it's ma'am.
I actually said both of you guys. It was general.
Right beforehand, you fucking said sir.
Sir? Okay.
Motherfucker, take it outside. If you want to call me sir again, I will show you a fucking sir.
I apologize.
Motherfucker.
I apologize now.
Basically, feminism is fine as a movement which stirs up thought and conversation at the fringes of a society, one propped up by a stable and established mainstream identity, but its philosophy has never been internally consistent enough that adoption can effectively be scaled up without social disaster. Now, of course, this doesn't mean that we should forget that women have rights and should be seen as moral equals to men, but in reality, even that conversation was completely derailed and corrupted by the unvetted precepts of feminist ideology. For God's sake, the Second World War, by necessity, did more for the social and professional perception of women than feminism was ever going to do. But what it does mean is that China cracking down on feminism in recent years makes perfect sense. It's the same reason it makes sense that Russia cracked down on what it called the promotion of homosexual lifestyles. For one thing, when success is measured in growth as it is, it's understandable to get a little nervous about the spread of lifestyles and ideologies that sow discord and suppress reproduction in your country, especially when you already have a declining birth rate. It might be distasteful, particularly from the perspective of Western liberal sensibilities, but the Western solution to the same problem has been, essentially, to destabilize their own societies by attempting to import a conservative underclass from Africa and the Middle East to pick up the slack for the aging natives. But the modern slave trade of the Western liberal elites is obviously a topic for another day. The second and more pertinent issue is that as they've evolved in the developed world, movements like feminism have acquired far more baggage than just conversations about rights. In 2021, feminism can more effectively be analyzed as a weapon of fifth-generation warfare than as a genuine movement for positive change. In fact, most contemporary wokeness can be easily viewed through the same lens. So let's just consider for a second what fifth-generation warfare, or 5GW, is, and what it's all about, what it means, and what the hell I'm referring to when I talk about it. I've put a couple of links in the description below to help you fully understand the idea if you want to do some additional reading, but it is still a blurry concept. It's largely defined by the context and the capabilities of the nations engaging in it. In fact, its blurriness is very meta. It's a part of what it is, essentially. To sum it up as simply as I can, though, fifth-generation warfare engages every aspect, every facet of human existence. It largely removes the distinction between combatant and non-combatant, and it tends to gain ground by winning hearts and minds, as they say. You don't just drop bombs on your enemy's buildings, but on their networks, on their culture, on their very perceptions of reality, of right and wrong. It is nothing less than full-spectrum warfare in a way that we just don't understand, that have never considered it before. Now, from the Chinese perspective, the concept of unrestricted warfare, as outlined in the 1999 book written by a pair of Chinese colonels, I can't remember their names, it's not only dovetails nicely with the Western 5GW idea, but it greatly expands upon its nuances. So it's a little surprised that the Chinese Communist Party has made sure to bolster China's defenses by strictly controlling or outright banning foreign social media platforms within her borders, thus inuring themselves against one of the most vociferous spreaders of infected thinking. The Chinese understanding of the military conflicts of the future massively outstrips that of America's political elites, who are still caught up in the distractions of arms races that are hamstrung and bloated by political maneuvering, diversity considerations, and an understanding and expectation of warfare that's been shaped by decades spent dicking around in the sand against enemies who couldn't really be expected to fight back very well. Compared to America, Chinese military is aimed at achieving precise goals, at being effective. And if you want your military to be more effective, especially from a 5GW perspective, then you need your entire society to be more effective. Because, once again, the line between combatant and non-combatant has been blurred. So you'd want to position excellence as a cultural aspiration. Since feminism undermines the cohesiveness and effectiveness of the society and it spurns hierarchies of merit, it will slowly destroy the society's ability to compete with uninfected societies, and thus it must be burned from societies that aspire to greatness. So think about education as one example. China's universities pump out STEM graduates at a rate of knots, while America's institutions of higher learning, hamstrung as they are by woke thinking, decry their lack of female STEM majors while simultaneously celebrating that men represent a minority of degree holders. Right? They flood their society with race and gender studies majors, political scientists, and philosophy PhDs, all set to contribute little to their world but agitation. This weakness then leaks out into the private sector, where woke-aware businesses will independently roll out strategies and communications campaigns based on flawed social theories that unwittingly sabotage the nation by demoralizing and misinforming its people. Again, China's system, by comparison, aims for effectiveness, while the modern West, typified by American wokeness, has a failing interest in excellence. And please note that I'm not trying to cheerlead for China here. I have Western sympathies in general, and I find the values upon which America was founded to be absolutely admirable. But those values are dying in the very nation that was built upon them, and if nothing else, China has the confidence, at least, to strongly assert its values without having to justify those values by claiming their universality. While for their part, Americans seem not to know what they stand for anymore, and as they say, if you stand for nothing, you'll fall for anything. Primarily what I'm doing is having fun with an idea, inviting you to do the same, and trying to highlight the fact that, yes, when viewed objectively and with an appropriately long-term perspective, contemporary feminism is very readily recognizable as a weapon of fifth-generation war. Not only is it an effective weapon, but it also has a massive area of effect if the broadcasting power of its target is sufficiently wide. The cultural bombs went off in America and the UK, but given those countries' spheres of influence, the fallout zone encompasses the entirety of the Anglosphere and beyond, including us here in South Africa. And given this and other observations that one could reasonably make, it's not exactly surprising that there are those who believe that we are already in the midst of the first maneuvers of what might be the Third World War. I mean, we've always known it wouldn't look like any war that had come before it. Even having said all of this, though, we should all be very careful about knee-jerk celebrations of a Chinese Communist Party crackdown on feminist activists. Whatever you might think of feminists, especially in the West, the CCP might not be the best choice of ideological ally. Honestly, Western wokeness has made civil rights look like such a liability that it will not be surprising if genuine authoritarians and dictators around the world use the useful idiots on America's radical left as an excuse for the abuse of human rights in their own countries. So be careful about rallying behind that. Anyway, guys, if you've made it this far, thank you very much for listening to my little ramble. If you think you got something out of it, I'd love to see you stick around, so smash the like button and hit subscribe if you want more. Otherwise, I will catch up with you soon. Cheers.